on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot.
Hello, and welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How's it going, Dylan?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Yes, I see.
I'm hanging in there.
Yes.
Trying to make it through this marriage.
I will not aggravate you anymore.
Make it through this marriage while podcasting.
Yes, it's tough sometimes.
Yep.
Yes, it is. But it was a beautiful day outside today.
I went on a long walk, a lengthy walk in the sunshine.
And you were just soaking up that vitamin D.
I needed some vitamin D.
I think we all need some vitamin D now in our lives.
That, and I need to drop this 40 pounds I've gained during COVID. It's been a whole fucking year that we've been stuck in the house.
And it's starting to show. I think everyone's kind of just like, oh my goodness, when can I try to get back to just a little bit of normal?
We got the burnout.
We burnt.
I want to say thanks to Emily. She is our brand new patron, and she's sponsoring today's show. She joined us at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. Not only is she supporting the show, but she's going to access all sorts of bonus content, ad-free episodes, and you can also join us at patreon.com.
Yes, thank you, Emily.
Yeah, so make sure you go check that out because you never know. You might need some extra content in your life.
Yeah, all up in your ear.
Well, this week, we're going to shift our focus from a single big case to bring several unsolved murders from Maryland.
Yes, these are some rather strange cases, really.
We'll be focusing on the areas of Anne Arundel County, Prince George's County, and Baltimore County, which is an area I'm quite familiar with as I lived there for about 3 years in my younger days.
Yes, so you were stationed there some during the Navy.
In Fort Meade.
Right?
Yes.
But you also lived there outside of being stationed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of these areas I'm very familiar with.
So when you're talking about them, you can actually picture the area they're talking about.
Right.
Interesting.
And that's the thing where, this sort of geographic region where we're going to be talking about, these three counties, these towns are very close to one another. I would say all of these are within, maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes. So quick drives.
In a quick drive, you can be into multiple towns and multiple counties.
Right. So keep that in mind as we go through our true crime tales for today.
Okay.
Are you ready, Dylan?
I am ready. This is a pretty big story, and we got to get straight into it.
Donna Lee Dustin was born on December 29th, 1955, to parents Joe and Dolores. Donna attended Bowie High School, graduating in 1973. She was 17 years old and loved the Steve Miller Band.
Well, I think she's not the only person that loves Steve Miller.
Who doesn't want to be a midnight toker? Her father, Joe, worked at the United Unions building in Washington, D.C., and Donna landed a job in the same building where her father worked, and she was a clerk for the Ironworkers International Union. Donna was a vivacious young woman with long brown hair and naturally beautiful. She was described by those who knew her as a very happy-go-lucky kind of girl.
Sounds like a nice young lady.
Bowie had been a small town with an almost country feel, located halfway between Washington, D.C. and Annapolis. In the early 1960s, waves of development brought tracts of new housing, drawing families from the city. The Dustins were part of that great suburban migration, moving from Washington to the Somerset section of town. Now Bowie is the 5th most populous city in Maryland.
Oh, wow. Sounds like it just grew and grew. Yeah, it was interesting because during that period, I think we might take subdivisions and things like that for granted nowadays, but they really didn't exist outside of the city, these types of neighborhoods. As soon as you got outside the city, it was fairly rural and, more like farmhouses and things like that. But yeah, the suburbs, just after World War II, there was a dramatic increase in car ownership. A lot more people had cars, and then that coupled with the 1956 Act the National Interstate and Defense Highway Act, which started connecting all these roads together and making our actual highways, which made it easier to travel to and from the city to get to work.
Oh, so you had more of the commuters.
Yes,
then.
that
Okay.
was the birth of the commuter, if you will.
Interesting, Dylan.
Thank you.
Joe and Dolores, along with their 13-year-old son Alan, departed Maryland around November the 9th. Joe wanted to get a jump start on the family's vacation. They were heading to Florida for Disney World.
Yeah, and I guess back then that was still a fairly new and very something kids really wanted to do, go to Disney World.
Definitely. Dolores had promised Donna she'd say goodbye, so the woman woke her daughter early, maybe around 5 a.m. Donna was planning to stay behind at their Somerset home with a friend. The mother and daughter said their goodbyes, and it would be the last time Dolores saw her daughter alive.
And how sad is that? And you never know that's going to be the last time you see a loved one. And to just, always be hanging on those last words, and hopefully they were, I love you, goodbye, good words. But yeah, you just never know when something might happen to someone.
The Dustin family didn't have reservations about leaving their daughter behind in Maryland. Bowie was considered a relatively safe area, and Donna was a self-sufficient young woman. Donna had grown up with most of her friends, since they were little kids, and after graduation, she was still hanging around with her high school friend group. However, Donna had also made friends with a different group of people. This group had a reputation for partying, drug use, and casual sex. This rougher crowd was known to engage in fistfights, demolition derbies.
Wow, like at a track or in the street?
No, like in the streets.
Really?
Like these guys would buy these old beater cars and would smash into each other in the streets.
Maybe track each other down and just start smashing into each other?
Yeah.
That would be, could you imagine being there on the street just hanging out and all of a sudden people start intentionally ramming each other?
Quite a spectacle.
Yes.
And there were rumors of sexual assaults. The men were known to ply females with drinks during these parties, then draw them into group sex, sometimes consensual, other times with blurred lines. These guys called it running a train.
Oh, well, that's not cool, especially the non-consensual part. But I could never even hang around a group of guys or one guy who talked about doing things like this, getting a girl really, really drunk with intentions of forcing yourself upon them. That's just disgusting to me.
It is disgusting. On Friday, November the 16th, 1973, Donna and her friend Lori Green, who was staying at the Dustin residence, decided to drive into Georgetown to do some shopping. Donna was anticipating a date with a young man she'd met at a pizza parlor. Donna was searching for a new pair of jeans, so the friends also had plans to buy some tickets for an upcoming concert. Again, the Steve Miller Band.
Oh, wow. I bet Donna was looking forward to going to see her favorite band.
I'm sure, right?
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah. That's so many good songs, right?
Yeah.
She was thinking about that Jungle Love.
Yeah. Yeah,
down in Swingtown.
Yeah, maybe we can catch them at a county fair.
After a fun outing, the pair returned to the Dustin residence, where Donna readied herself for the big date. She applied makeup, wore her brand new jeans along with a pink sweater. The two heated up some alphabet soup for dinner while chatting about picking up those concert tickets the next morning. Around 7 p.m., Donna's date arrived. An 18-year-old volunteer firefighter named Christopher Miller had been driving Donna's date. He had a 68 red Chevelle Super Sport 396. So a fucking hot car.
Yeah, that made my undergarments moist.
Yes. Okay, that's disgusting. Along with Donna, her date and another female rounded out the foursome. So they were doing like a little double date thing. And they made their way to Lanham, where they picked up some 6-packs of beer. Then they stopped off at Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor because the girls wanted some cones. Cruising around listening to rock and roll on 8 tracks. Is that not a blast from the past?
Well, yeah, but that sounds like a fun time. And I wonder whatever happened to cruising. Kids nowadays just don't do it.
They don't. Well, the four finally made their way to a party in Bladensburg. After a few hours of drinking and hanging out at the party, they departed, driving around a while longer. Then Miller dropped Donna and her date off at the Dustin residence. The couple went inside the home where they listened to music, and then Donna had sex with her date on the sofa in the family room.
Well, I guess you get it when you can.
Oh, yeah?
I would be worried to death someone's going to come out and see you.
So are you saying that, like, as a teenager, you weren't, like, having sex on the family sofa?
No, I was a late bloomer.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But once my flower did bloom, wow, what a flower it was.
That's so not true.
It's true.
It is not true.
It's beautiful.
It's really cute that you try to paint that picture for our listeners.
That's okay. Well, I'm here to tell truth.
After sex, Donna asked her date if he wanted to smoke some pot. However, when he took a hit off the bowl, he told her it didn't taste like pot. This is when Donna admits it was actually PCP.
Yeah, and I've never done PCP, but or angel dust as it's known, but it's always seemed like something that I would be too scared to try.
Can you tell us a little bit about PCP? Because I'm not exactly familiar with what you're like my go-to.
Yeah, about drugs.
You're like the physician's drug reference over here.
Oh, I mean,
to ask you, like, what?
I mean, yeah, I've never done any type of substance. I even avoid caffeine and sugar.
So what is PCP?
Yeah, you guys
it's
know
like a
me.
chemical, right?
Yeah, it's a straight up. I'm fairly certain it's a purely synthetic compound, and it can create hallucinations, distorted perceptions of sound, which I find interesting because that can really mess with a person when you're not only seeing things but hearing things in a very strange way, and it also can lead to violent behaviors and outbursts. And I think most of us, even if you're not familiar with the PCP or have ever seen it, have heard those stories, especially from back in the day when it was a little more popular, of people thinking they could literally fly, climbing up on a building and jumping off because they think they have wings or something like that. And interestingly, it was originally developed for an anesthetic. So It was intentionally made, but then later on, of course, someone's figured out it has these other side effects that make it something someone want to use in a recreational manner.
During my research, I found that PCP was quite popular in this area at this time, and it was mostly like sprinkled over or added into marijuana.
Yeah.
That's how they were using it?
Yeah, I think it was fairly popular during this time period nationwide.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, her date, knowing he had a busy Saturday ahead filled with work and chores, told Donna he needed to head out. Donna had changed into fresh clothes at this point. A red and brown plaid blouse, jeans, gold platform shoes. Pretty groovy, huh? And a brown coat. She was also carrying a brown leather purse. She told her date she wanted to keep partying.
So she's went and had this nice date with this guy. They've come back, hung out on the couch. But she's just ready to keep the fun going.
Yes.
Okay.
Let the good times roll, basically. So around 1:30 a.m., Donna dropped her date off at his house. Afterwards, during interrogation, he would say that Donna seemed completely fine, maybe a little high. Toxicology reports would state her blood alcohol level was 0.19, twice the legal intoxication level.
Wow. So it sounds like when he left her company, she was not that intoxicated. She wasn't intoxicated and maybe just a little high on weed or a little PCP.
Exactly.
But not drunk.
So she most likely consumed a large amount of alcohol after dropping off her date.
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
She told him she really liked him, had a great time, wanted to see him again. So they parted ways with the intention of another date. 3 people will come forward sharing with investigators that they'd seen Donna at a party around 1:30 a.m. This was a house party hosted by this rougher crowd.
Oh, it must have been located on the wrong side of the tracks.
The party was a crazy scene. There was around 100 people with music, dancing, alcohol, PCP, and marijuana. People were passed out inside and outside the home.
It sounds like a scene from Animal House.
Definitely all they needed was some togas, right? Well, according to witnesses, Donna departed this party maybe around 3 a.m. or so with 4 or 5 men. They went back to her house to have more drinks. During the course of this party, if you want to call it that, at Donna's house, she had sex with several men. However, no one knows if it was consensual sex.
Wow, that's crazy to wrap your head around. I mean, if it is consensual, and she's into that, that's her choice. She can do that. And I would never make fun of someone for doing that in any manner. But yeah, I guess we just don't know if she was into that or not.
On Saturday morning around 9 a.m., a week into rabbit hunting season, some hunters were in the woods in an area called Meyer Station. The 130-acre tract of forest was known during this time as a place for teenagers. Kids would gather there to party, have sex, a lover's lane type of situation, and sometimes get involved in dangerous mischief, like setting old cars on fire.
Yeah, these types of places are usually called something like the old road or the gravel pit. I think every town has a space like this.
Myers Station Road was about 100 feet from the Anne Arundel county line. The Bowie Raceway was close by. So a lot of people who live in that area might know where the raceway is. And her body was located pretty close to this area. A man named Buzz Meyer was hunting with his 3 sons when they neared an old rail bed because there had been a trolley line that ran through, so the tracks were still there. Another hunter stepped out of the woods, warning Meyer not to bring his boys further, exclaiming, "There's been a murder back here."
Wow, how surprising that would be. You're just out there enjoying the day, hunting with your 3 sons, and then someone's like, boom, there's a body.
The body of a young woman was found lying naked in the brush. Her head was bashed in. There was a lug wrench partially inside her body, appearing as though she'd been sexually assaulted with the tool. Donna Lee Dustin's body was less than 3 miles from her home.
Just how many times have we heard a story like that? Someone is attacked or killed that close to their home, that close to their loved ones.
Donna's class ring was one of few items that aided investigators in making an identification. An autopsy would reveal that Donna died from blunt force trauma, repeated blows to the head with a blunt instrument, and no weapon was found. And although there was the lug wrench, through my research, it didn't seem like investigators felt that was the murder weapon.
Yeah, it seems like they would say, "Hey, this was the murder weapon," and I'm sure they had a good look at maybe the marks on her head or the wounds on her head, and just didn't think the lug wrench was the murder weapon.
Evidence suggested she'd had sex with multiple men before her death. 2 boot prints were left behind, which was the only clue for investigators to work with.
So not much evidence at the scene, and that's going to make it very hard for them to move forward with this investigation.
Investigators began working the case, but quickly hit dead ends. The clothing that Donna had been wearing was never located. Police were of the opinion that there were multiple crime scenes with more than one person participating in her murder.
So she was completely nude?
Yes. Since Donna's murder, more than 200 witnesses have been interviewed, with 16 men being tested for DNA. 2 men specifically were mentioned as part of the small group that Donna was theorized to have been hanging out with at the time, and they were actually tracked down in 2000 by a Washington Post reporter who's been covering this case.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, it sounds like the cops were trying their best to solve this case. That's a lot of man hours on all those interviews and all the different testing they did.
One of the men still lives in the Bowie area. He said it was too emotional to talk about. Did not want to cooperate with the reporter. A second man living in Syracuse, New York, refused to comment, and there was another man who was living in Florida. There was also like a third man that they tried to reach out to or whatever, but he had passed away. Or he might have been the fourth man. I'm sorry. I get my numbers confused. Several of the men who were contacted by police immediately retained lawyers. A court order was granted in order to get some blood samples from the man who had been living in Syracuse, New York. The police gathered other samples of the alleged party attendees for the purpose of comparing the DNA found on Donna's body. Police have never released information regarding the DNA samples or if they matched anyone they'd contacted.
Well, you think if it was some kind of a strong lead that the public would know, but I mean, maybe they're trying to protect the integrity of the investigation.
The Florida man was a sex offender who had a record dating back to 1965. A pretty lengthy criminal history, which included sexual assault.
Oh, wow.
According to an affidavit, the New York man and the Florida man had gotten a 6-pack of Schlitz beer on the 17th, and they were out looking for some girls to pick up. That was their story. And Schlitz caps were found on a stool in Donna's living room.
Oh, well, that's interesting, though that could have been left there by anybody. But Schlitz, have you ever tried Schlitz beer?
Well, no, but I had a cat named Schlitz
Oh, really?
when I was in college.
Yeah, it's not very good.
Isn't it like a malt liquor? Is it even
That
a
I can
beer?
remember. Wait, is that long before my time? I could swear I've tried it.
Isn't it? I think it's a malt liquor.
Maybe.
I think it's like is it a beer?
It gives you the shits.
I just know I've seen it like in a 40.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But it's like super cheap.
Yeah.
Witnesses claim the Florida man showed up for work on November 17th, which was the morning that Donna's body was found, disheveled, wearing the same clothes from the previous evening. They were stained with something dark, his pants were covered in briars and thistles, and his behavior throughout the day was reportedly strange, according to coworkers.
Well, see, that's very interesting considering where the body was discovered, off in the woods, in the brush, it sounds like. And that guy sounds like he had a long night of some kind. I mean, who goes to work like that?
I mean, some of us, I guess.
Well, I mean, you don't even brush the damn briars and thorns and shit off your pants?
Look,
I mean,
there have been many 8 o'clock classes that you show up in the morning and you might have some briars and thistles.
in your hair?
You have, yeah.
Okay.
There's no telling. You might still be wearing a toga, Dylan.
Oh, my goodness.
In the aftermath of Donna's murder, her family offered a $1,000 reward for any information. At the time of the investigation into Donna's murder, there was a huge narcotics investigation happening as well, so no one wanted to speak to police. And though Donna was very well liked, popular, she had a ton of friends, not a single person came forward with any valuable information to crack the case.
Well, that's surprising on one hand, but I guess given her connection to that kind of the rougher crowd and drugs and things like that, I guess maybe they were scared about getting caught up in some drug-related issues if they did. But, even if it's your real friend, that shouldn't matter. And also most of the time, murder police or homicide, they don't care about that stuff. They don't care about the drugs or any other petty break-ins, anything you did like that. They want to solve the murder. So they could have come forward and probably been fine on that.
For 48 years, Donna Lee Dustin's killer or killers have roamed free. It's just really sad. I read some interviews with her mother who talked about like crying every single day ever, like since this had happened. So for like years, she's cried every day over her daughter.
Well, yeah, she's been devastated and nothing's going to make it better. But not only that, she still doesn't have answers to why or what happened to her daughter.
It's very sad. Donna's case is not the only unsolved murder in this area of Maryland. In 1977, Dylan, the Baltimore Evening Sun reported there were 13 cold case murders since 1971. So in a span of 6 years, 13 murders.
That seems like
Unsolved.
a lot. I mean,
Now, these murders, they baffled police. 6 were committed in 1975 alone.
that's a lot in 1 year in the same area. These women keep turning up, as naked, nude, in different states of undress. It's very strange, I think.
Well, let's get into the second case in our series. Are you ready?
Oh, Unsolved Maryland's got me wondering what the hell's going on.
Okay, Joyce Helen Malecki was a 20-year-old woman who worked as a liquor distributor. She was born June 12th of 1949 in Baltimore County, Maryland. She had 3 brothers. She was found stabbed to death near the Little Patuxent River at Fort Meade, Maryland, November 13th, 1969. She'd been missing for 2 days when she was found. Malecki was last seen Christmas shopping in Glen Burnie, Maryland. Since she was found on federal property, the FBI took over this investigation.
Oh, yes. So there you go. A lot of times you might think the FBI takes over and has all these resources and it's going to help. But personally, I think in a lot of cases that the local law enforcement may be more familiar with the people around, or when they get stories from people, connections, or, some characters that might draw their attention that the FBI might miss. What do you think about local compared to FBI?
I agree, because this is their backyard. This is their home. These investigators, these police officers, law enforcement oftentimes know the family. They may be familiar with, maybe not directly the family involved, but maybe other relatives. It's a small area. This person went to your high school. I mean, I just feel like there's more of that connection and that desire to solve this. You live here. Maybe you have a family.
Yeah. I think
you're right.
Take it personal, and they want to. They're very passionate about solving the crime. I'm not saying the FBI doesn't want to, but I think that personal element really could mean a lot in a case like this.
You're right, Dawn. I think so. So at the time of her disappearance, she'd been living in Lansdowne. Like Donna later, because Donna was killed, 3 years after this, she was discovered by two hunters constructing a deer blind. Her hands were bound behind her back. She had scratches and bruises on her body, indicating that she'd put up a fight. An autopsy revealed her cause of death was either by choking or drowning. She had a single deep knife wound to her throat, but they didn't believe that's what killed her. Joyce's body had 15 superficial cuts in the neck area. Her forehead, nose, and chin had abrasions.
That's very strange. I wonder what caused the various different types of wounds.
Joyce had been wearing a brown turtleneck sweater with plaid slacks. She had planned to meet up with her boyfriend, a Fort Meade soldier, after the shopping trip. They were going to go on a date. Malecki's disappearance occurred 4 days after Cathy Cesnik, a nun whose murder was featured on the Netflix docu-series The Keepers. Did you watch that, Dylan?
I watched most of it, and it's rather disturbing.
It is very disturbing. If you're not familiar, Cathy Cesnik, like I mentioned, she was a nun. Her decomposed body was found in Lansdowne in January of 1970. At the time of the murders, investigators believe that there was some kind of connection between Cathy and Joyce.
Well, yeah, I guess it'd be hard to not think that.
Especially since both had been shopping just before their murders. Like Cathy Cesnik's murder, Joyce's case remains unsolved. In the Keepers documentary, a priest named Joseph Maskell was accused of sexual assault. And it turns out Malecki had spent time around Maskell, just like Cathy Cesnik.
Yeah, and if you have watched The Keepers, you'll know that he sounded like a very dangerous and just a very cruel man.
Maskell also had ties to Fort Meade. He had served as Army chaplain there.
Really?
We'll actually get into some other unsolved cases in the area with ties to the Catholic Church. Now, am I suggesting that Maskell was involved? I mean, not exactly. It's a theory worth exploring. But I typically am of the mindset that there aren't as many coincidences in the world as one might think.
Yeah, if it just keeps pointing a finger or coming back to... That's like the way I think about it is if you have thinking about something you can't explain it and you have this other element you start thinking about and it kind of explains some of the unknowns about whatever you're contemplating, then you have to pay that attention.
Well, when there's just so many coincidences, it's probably not a coincidence, right?
Yeah, after a while,
come on.
After a while, it's a pattern.
Exactly. I like that. So on October 16th of 1970, 16-year-old Pamela Lynn Conyers had returned home from a pep rally bonfire at Glen Burnie High School around 8:30 p.m. The following Saturday evening, she was planning to attend a school dance. While readying her outfit, she told her mother she needed to buy some shoe polish. With $5 in hand and keys to a 1968 Dodge car, which was the family vehicle, she headed to Arundel Mall, which was not far from her family's home on Twin Ridge Drive. Pamela never made it home. 3 days later, which was a Monday, a man walking through a wooded area near Route 100 found the family's Dodge in a median. And it was just abandoned. The road was still under construction, and from what I understand, the road went through some kind of overgrown, abandoned farm.
Oh, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Law enforcement immediately began searching this area, looking for Pamela. It was on Tuesday that a patrolman found the young woman not far from the Dodge car. She was fully clothed, wearing pants and a sweater. Her purse and underwear were missing, have never been recovered. Investigators interviewed over 200 people.
Yeah, so she was fully clothed, but then maybe she didn't wear underwear.
Maybe, or if someone sexually assaulted her, perhaps they took the underwear thinking that it could it could be used as evidence. Perhaps.
Well, that's true.
But I don't know for sure if she was sexually assaulted or not. My research did not state whether that was the case.
Well, I think it's fairly, from an investigator standpoint, when someone is Typically, if someone's sexually assaulted, they're left in some type of state of undress.
A helicopter was dispatched over this area, hoping that it would be able to help with some clues. Some clothing and car evidence were sent to the lab, but the forensic testing didn't turn up anything helpful in the case. The car had been wiped clean of fingerprints.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
A store clerk confirmed that Pamela had been at the mall on Friday evening buying the shoe polish. But beyond that, investigators had no idea what happened to Pamela after she left the mall.
So yet another woman who's went shopping in one of the local retail areas, and then no one sees her since.
Yes.
Wow.
Coincidence?
I don't know.
Let's pause for a moment and take a quick break. And we are back, Dylan. On September 27th of 1971, 16-year-old Grace Elizabeth Montaigne, also known as Gay, she was a Franklin High School student, visited a Reisterstown shopping center and then disappeared.
Yet again.
This is our fourth victim. Shopping, vanishes, turns up dead.
See, this is why when you try to take me shopping, I'm reluctant to go.
This is why?
Yeah, because you could maybe not make it home after you go.
Well, that should make you want to go shopping with me.
Well, what if we both get kidnapped and killed? That's what I'm talking about.
That'd have to be a big kidnapper to drag your ass in a van.
You think, well, they could trick me in?
How?
They'd be like, oh, got cigarettes and tall boys in here.
Yeah. Oh, we got a Panthers game on.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know the season was on.
Exactly. Okay. She was found dead 2 days later in Baltimore, and it was behind the Mount Auburn Cemetery located near a Catholic church.
There you go.
So another tie to the Catholic Church.
Well, you know, it's no offense to anyone. The Catholic Church just finds itself in trouble a lot, it seems like.
They've had some scandals. A former Baltimore City Police homicide detective told a reporter back in 1993 that his efforts in the 70s to solve Gay's murder were blocked by police officials who were covering up to protect someone.
Wow.
The officer was told to drop the investigation into the murder, and when he refused to do so, he was forced into an early retirement because he'd been found to be overzealous.
What does that even mean?
Well, he was just way too into doing his job.
He's a detective trying way too hard to accomplish his goals related to his job.
Now, is that not strange?
Yeah, that's beyond strange. That's really weird.
Yeah. In 1975, a 14-year-old altar boy named Francis Danny Crocetti, he was a Catholic altar boy, was found in a wooded area near Our Lady of Victory Church in parochial school. He had been stabbed with an ice pick. Father Maskell, from the Keepers, had ties to this church, as well as having lived and served at the rectory from 1968 to 1970.
It could be a coincidence, but yet again, here's another death that is connected to him in a way. Maybe a couple of degrees of separation, but there it is again.
13-year-old Heather Porter of Lansdowne, and again, Lansdowne, Cathy Cesnik, Joyce Malecki, they both lived in Lansdowne. It's very strange, right? Heather Porter was kidnapped and killed in September of 1981, so a little bit later than some of our other cases. Her family attended St. Clement Church, another of Maskell's churches.
Damn.
On the evening of September 22nd, she was last seen walking near her home. She was found in a wooded area one day after she'd gone missing in the Baltimore suburb of Towson by a man who was out walking his dog. Evidence suggested she'd been dragged to this spot where she had been left. Heather had been strangled and stabbed. DNA was recovered from Porter's body, but no match has ever been made. Heather had big dreams of becoming an artist someday.
That's so sad.
Since her death, both of her parents and her brother have passed away. Heather's sister Mary is still hoping for closure in the case. A $2,000 reward is still being offered for information that leads to an arrest or charges in Heather's case. In the sexual abuse allegations against Maskell, another woman who had attended St. Clement Church around the same time as Heather stated she was molested by Maskell while she went to church there.
Yeah, I just don't know how you can keep having someone, especially a priest or, someone like that, accused over and over of doing something like this, and they just keep their job and they just keep getting to go along with their life.
There have been theories surfacing since the release of the Keepers documentary series that perhaps Heather's murder is tied to that of Cathy Cesnik. Were Sister Cathy, Heather, and Danny Crocetti silenced by powerful members of a sex ring? Clearly, the Catholic Church has had a long history of well-hidden sex abuse, which was prevalent in Baltimore during the 70s. The odd thing about Heather's case is that the police have semen, skin, hair, and a piece of a shirt. So with today's technology, why isn't there more effort to make a DNA match? Because now they can do the familial DNA matches.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because we went over many cases where they do every time the technology improves or new techniques are developed, especially with DNA, it seems, they retest the evidence.
Well, now we have so many people sending in DNA through 23andMe or Ancestry that you would think in some of these cold cases, detectives would be more interested in entertaining those possibilities of finding a suspect through the familial DNA.
Yeah, instead of going from the old school, I've got a profile and I've got to get a sample from someone physically and then, compare the profiles. Now there's so many more options now. You can compare thousands, tens of thousands of profiles to your profile, through computers, through these programs. Now, would you do that? I think we've mentioned this before. Would you mind if they put you in this type of database to help solve crimes if you were to give your DNA sample to one of these companies?
Well, I've never submitted to, any kind of DNA testing for like entertainment purposes.
I haven't either because I know my ancestors and I know that I come from white trash.
Well, I know my ancestors as well.
So I'm not really wondering about that.
I come off some real cracker ass stock. And so I don't really feel like I need to do the DNA testing because I know that like the bulk of my family they're from England.
Yeah.
But I would not be opposed to having my DNA tested to solve crimes. And then you find out like a cousin or somebody, is a killer. I mean, that doesn't bother me. I'm like, fuck, lock them up.
Well, yeah, I haven't used any of those services, but if I did, I would have no problem with them putting me in a database to help, solve unsolved crimes. Because if I did learn, I know what I've done. I've never heard anyone
I'm
like
more
that.
paranoid about my organs being harvested and sold on the black market or something.
Yeah, I think I'd have to sell some of my organs at a discount. But yeah, I would if it did come back that someone related to me did a horrible crime, I would be the first one in line wanting them locked up. So that wouldn't bother me a bit.
You'd be chanting, "Lock them up,
yeah,
lock them up,"
with a pitchfork.
While Dylan's standing there like, "Hey y'all need some discounted body parts? I got clearance sale right now going on my liver, my kidneys, my pancreas. You can get this stuff half price. We're talking 80% off."
I got this one lobe in my liver. I'm pretty sure I hardly ever used it in my 20s, which is the only time we would have been worried about bothering it. And as far as I can tell, it's perfectly good.
See?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for Heather's sister Mary, she says even if the person responsible for Heather's murder is dead, at least she'd get some justice and know they weren't out in the world hurting anyone else.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of family members lean on that. I heard a case recently that was one of their biggest reliefs was that this person who had killed their loved one couldn't harm anyone else. I think they find a lot of solace in that very fact.
Well, absolutely.
Right.
The possibility of a police cover-up in some of these unsolved killings has complicated the investigation into these cases. According to the Keepers, many of the sexual assault victims who accused Maskell told of politicians and police officers who were also involved in the sexual abuse.
Well, see, that's one of the things in the Keepers I found the most disturbing. Now, besides him, he obviously sounded like a real asshole and a monster. But it was like a connected ring of people because some of his victims were counted coming into his office or his quarters where he lived, and there being other strange men they'd never seen before. And some of them even said they would have like a police uniform on or seem like someone really important because it's from a child's perspective. They were actually just passing these kids around.
It's gross.
It's beyond gross. And if you do anything like that, I think it shouldn't take a whole lot to get a life in prison term from harming a child.
What I think is really interesting, Dylan, when I started researching this story, I initially found the Donna Dustin case, and I realized no other podcast had covered her true crime case. There's very little information out there about her murder, so I thought it was important for us to detail the crime, let people know about it, especially with these unsolveds. I mean, I don't know if it's kind of egotistical to think that your podcast makes a difference.
Your hubris.
But, I have to think that the more people hear these stories, and especially these unsolveds that are lesser known, that there has to be someone out there who knows something. And that there could be some chance or possibility that perhaps someone knows something, it's weighing on them. Eventually they come forth with what they know, right?
Yeah.
That would be my hope.
Well, yeah, and it's not unheard of, that very scenario you're describing, they're happening. And if someone was to hear this and know something or think something about it, then they could be that person that finally brings relief to these families that have wondered or all these years what happened to their loved one.
Well, and it's important, I think, to tell their story and to shine a light, like I said, on these kind of lesser known cases. So my intention originally was not to examine multiple crimes, but once I started digging into Donna's story and was finding articles bringing up these other unsolved cases,
similar,
and many of them were women around her age, ranging from 13 to 23 years old. I mean, it's like, wow, what the hell's going on in Maryland in the 70s? In this particular, area, you've got like 3 counties that are pretty heavily hit by unsolved cases.
Yeah.
And murders.
It seems to be a similar victim. They share characteristics, similar circumstances a lot of times, when and where they disappear from, and even where their bodies are discovered later.
And then you bring in like the documentary The Keepers, and you've got that element, so it just really had my brain going in a million directions.
Well, and that's what's so scary about these pedophile and these sex rings, because they very often do include people in power. And so when you say things like they have this evidence, this, possible DNA evidence, why aren't they pursuing, modern techniques with it and stuff? It really does make you wonder.
Well, that, and you have a former detective saying they shut me down.
They forced him into retirement.
They didn't want me to cover this case. They didn't want me to dig deep.
They come to me multiple times like, hey, you need to stop. And when he refused, he claims he's pushed into retirement for being overzealous. Whatever the hell that is.
Back to our story. I know we got a little sidetracked there. On February 2nd of 1974 at 9:05 a.m., 29-year-old Lois Williams signed in at her job in Silver Spring, Maryland. However, she never signed out. And the following day, she was reported missing, I believe, by her grandmother. Her body was found in a wooded area near Linthicum, Maryland, around 8 a.m. on February the 18th. So for 16 days, she had been missing. Her manner of death was described as trauma to the upper body.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound good at all.
I believe just like everything I found said trauma to the upper body. But I did find some comments on various news sites where it seems to indicate that she was stabbed.
Oh, okay.
So similar to some of our other victims.
Yes.
The only, differing factor about Lois was that she was African-American, and our other victims were Caucasian.
Yeah, and didn't you say she was very beautiful?
She was pretty. She was, gorgeous. Super beautiful. I will actually post some pictures of our victims on social media.
Yeah, and statistically speaking, that does, killers, predators usually have a type, and they stick to it. Often they stick to their own race, or, whatever race is predominant in the area, or to end up being the victims. Unless, of course, you're Sam Little, and he didn't give a damn. He was I think he was a predator of opportunity.
Definitely.
And that's what he got off on.
And that's another thing about these victims, just seeing their photos. They were all such beautiful young women. They were all so, strikingly pretty. and had their whole lives ahead of them.
I'm telling you.
Like Donna Dixon, she was gorgeous.
It's almost
Lois
like
Williams looks like a fucking runway model. I mean, just beautiful woman.
it's almost like there was someone, a predator, besides
Maskell.
in the church connection, which he was a predator and a monster for sure, or possibly there was just a predator, a killer, a serial killer, who had a certain type working this area, catching women when they're vulnerable, catching them, make sure they're by themselves, out shopping by themselves. And, it's a very cliche thing to get, grabbed from the parking lot, but it happens every day. And if you're careful and you stalk around and make sure a woman's by herself, it's actually a good time to catch them vulnerable.
It's scary.
It really is scary.
That's why you need to go shopping with me.
Well, I'm just afraid we both going to get took. And then who's going to clean up all our affairs? And then Kitty and little Kitty will be here by herself.
I love how the cat's like Big Kitty and Little Kitty.
Yeah.
They have names.
Yeah, I know. I just like to call them Big Kitty and Little Kitty.
You'll be safe with me. I carry a knife.
Well, see, I'm actually safer when you're with me than the other way around.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Because I'll protect you.
Yeah.
I am the protector.
You would lose your shit if anybody tried to mess with us.
I know.
Like real quick.
Thank you. I love how you paint for our listeners like I'm some little crazy Tasmanian devil running around.
Well,
like I'm like the Jersey devil. Like attacking and like a little, trail of fury behind me or something.
Well, yeah. That's about right. Thank you for putting it in very clear terms.
You like my little sound effects too?
Yeah.
Like I'm a little rabid creature.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I know I am. I can be mean as hell, but that's only because I got that whole flight or fight thing going on.
Well, I'm saying that's what you're not going to have it. You're going to react very strongly if somebody fucks with you.
Look, I'm all about self-preservation.
Hey, I'm down with it.
A lot of true crime.
I'll rent you out for the security for men.
Our next victim is 23-year-old Phyllis Bowie, or I don't know how to say her last name.
Maybe it's Boule.
It's Bohle.
Okay.
So would you say Bali?
Yeah.
Bowie? I'll say Bali. So Phyllis Bowie was found March 25th, 1974, on the bedroom floor of her Severn, Maryland home, which is located in Anne Arundel County. She had been viciously beaten with a fire poker, then stabbed 6 times with the fire poker.
Wow.
How fucking horrific is that?
Wow. So somebody comes into her home, attacks her with a weapon from her home, which is interesting. And, wow, that's brutal.
Phyllis was employed by the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration, and she'd been given the day off to celebrate Maryland Day.
Oh, wow. I went for Still Maryland Day.
Why don't we have like a North Carolina Day?
I don't know. Can we have
give us the day off?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a day off out of it.
I just want the day off to like not have to do laundry. Just
Yeah.
for one day. Okay. Described as a good girl with a great spirit, Phyllis was recently married. She had planned to spend the day off shopping with a girlfriend. There was no sign of forced entry into the house. Nothing was stolen. And I should also mention, her home was located in a pretty rural area. It was kind of like off the beaten path, wooded,
Really?
private type of area. It didn't sound like she was in a neighborhood.
That's really interesting.
It was like kind of an isolated, home, single family home. Investigators felt that the suspect had known Phyllis, and her husband Mike had been at work all day, only leaving to go to lunch. His movements were accounted for throughout the day. He had a very solid alibi, plenty of witnesses.
So one good thing, they do always suspect the husband or whatever, or suspect the wife. But, one good thing about it is when they do have a solid rock solid alibi, that you can take them out of the equation so you can concentrate on looking for another perpetrator.
DNA was collected and tested, but has never yielded a match. And guess what?
What?
She attended Archbishop Spalding High School. That's right, a Catholic high school. One of Maskell's cohorts, a man named Russell Phillips Welch, who is mentioned in The Keepers, was teaching at Archbishop Spalding in the 70s.
Are you kidding me?
So there were definite ties to this school and Maskell.
You got to be making this up.
I'm not making it up, Dylan.
Yeah, I tell you what. I mean, that just seems awful coincidental through all these different cases.
Well, and she was 23 and married, but it made me think, well, how could Maskell have been tied up in her murder, or how could there have been an angle that these men could have been involved? Well, perhaps they felt she was going to come forward with information she had or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly. And also, it's not her house being kind of secluded and off the beaten path. It seems a lot less likely of just some random
exactly.
random person. It seems like someone who maybe knew she lived out of the way or found out, kind of followed her to figure out where she is.
Well, and there was no forced entry into the home, but kind of during our little production meeting earlier, you mentioned, well, this was a time when people really weren't locking their doors.
It's true.
So, and if she's living in an isolated area, it's remote, perhaps she feels safe leaving the door unlocked because she doesn't have to worry about neighbors or people just wandering in the house, right?
Yeah, and I've lived in houses like that before where I never even locked my door when I left because I'm way up off the road, up a dirt road or gravel road.
Well, I think a lot of us, especially here in Appalachia, that's what we do.
Yeah.
You live up in a holler somewhere on top of a mountain.
Yep.
Your nearest neighbor's like a mile away.
And I always think that when they say, oh, there was no forced entry, so that they must have known their perpetrator. And I always think that, well, maybe the door just happened to be unlocked. And if it had been locked, it would have been kicked in, You just never know.
Makes sense. Well, a few months later, in July of 1974, 23-year-old Sandra Knight Berkey, who lived in an apartment in the Marley area of Anne Arundel County, had missed work for 2 days. A coworker from the insurance company where she was employed showed up at her apartment to check on the pretty blonde. The coworker discovered Sandra partially clothed, lying face down on the floor. She had been stabbed to death, much like Phyllis, as well as having been sexually assaulted. Hundreds of people were interviewed during the investigation. Though Sandra had been married, she was separated, with friends describing her as being very choosy over the types of men that she knew and associated with.
Wow. So one difference here, I guess we have to point out is these last two victims have been inside their home.
Yes.
Correct? Which, if it was connected to the other things, will be a big change in MO, which can happen. Sometimes killers, predators evolve. Or sometimes it's just it's all about opportunity.
When describing her rape, investigators said there were certain ritualistic aspects which often partnered with sex crimes.
So just like in the posing of the body or the rooms in a certain way.
I suspect that's what they meant.
Not like satanic ritual, but just like they could tell it was done intentionally by the perpetrator.
Yes.
That's my new favorite word today, perpetrator.
DNA was collected as well as fingerprints, but they were never matched to anyone. Sandra frequented a local gym in Glen Burnie. Everyone that knew her said she was incredibly well liked. Some theories have circulated that perhaps she was murdered by someone living in her apartment building or by a maintenance worker, but others speculate that someone from her gym may have been involved. Because it sounds like she was very focused on work, and the only other place she really would go was the gym, and that she seemed to be like really into working out.
Oh, like maybe someone from the gym or some face she even she don't know their name shows up at her door. Maybe she lets them in the house or opens the door. Yeah, and that also, you were talking about this earlier, would be a gym setting would be a place that someone who has issues, problems, could keep seeing someone working out, bending over. You can people concentrate in a gym. You can kind of stare at them without them noticing you. So that's the kind of setting that someone could maybe become obsessed with someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
in
and
their
her gym was
twisted
in
mind.
Glen Burnie, and some of our victims were shopping in Glen Burnie at the time of their disappearance. So, I mean, it could be that she had gone to the gym, maybe popped in the store, caught this person's eye. I mean, I don't know.
See, what blows my mind about this, it's not like you're talking about the state of Maryland with all these girls and all these cases, which you could be like, well, stuff happens. Statistically,
this is all within like a 30, maybe 40-mile radius.
This is all in the same area, the same exact area.
And some of these towns are literally like 5-10 minute drive, 15-minute drive, a few miles away.
Yeah, so that's just wild.
That's why I was just so like taken in with this story.
Every time you look up one and get the details on that, and then you just keep going and you just keep having other cases.
Especially when the article that you're reading about the one murder. Then you see detectives mentioning, well, there's this murder as well with the same MO, or we suspect this person could be involved with this person. And then it's just like, there's this web.
Yeah. I mean, even the professionals, the investigators are even pointing out that there's similarities, or they just don't, they think that these things might be connected. It's very interesting.
Our final unsolved case takes place in 1978. On November 24th, Diane Lynn Miller, she was a 22-year-old woman. She was found dead. Diane was known to hitchhike. Oh, sorry, guys. She was known to hitchhike, and she'd been missing from her home since November 14th, so for about 10 days. That was the last time that she was seen, when two friends dropped her off at an intersection in Glen Burnie, and it was the intersection of Caton and Frederick Avenues, where they meet with Hilton Street in Glen Burnie. And this is around 10:30 p.m. She had told her friends she was going to hitchhike the rest of the way home, and 10 days later, she was found fully clothed, multiple stab wounds. Discarded in, from what I understand, similar, like, wooded type of area.
What the hell?
Like some of the other victims.
Wow. I just don't know what to say. You know, you've blown my mind.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about these cases. Now, I'm of the opinion, and I mean, you know, we all know my opinion means so much. No. I'm of the opinion that Donna Lee Dustin's murder was isolated from these. I think the men she was partying with, something happened. Maybe they were fucked up on PCP, flew into a rage. Maybe she wasn't consenting to sexual advances, you know, was raped, attacked, killed. So I don't really clump her in with these others. If there's like a serial killer.
Right.
Like, I think her case is kind of unique on its own.
I agree.
But these others, I feel like it's got to be the work of a serial killer or maybe two serial killers in the area. Because they're just, the coincidences are just too much for me.
The coincidences, and I agree completely on Donna. I think whatever bad thing happened to her was in her world, someone she did know. Maybe something accidentally happened. She could have overdosed. We have PCP mixed into the equation. Who knows what other types of drugs? So, you know, someone
alcohol,
could have... alcohol, reports or evidence of her having sex with multiple men. We don't know if it was consensual. She could have told one guy no. He flies off the hand. Who knows? But I think it's definitely in her world, inside of her world, whatever happened to her. And that makes it sad as well. But these other cases, it's just the similarities, the where they're found, where the bodies are found at, the way they're killed.
Most of them have been stabbed,
where they disappear from,
strangled, sexually assaulted.
Yeah, and then they always, a lot of them disappeared from like a retail setting, and the last time they were seen was by a clerk or a friend in their shopping, and it just seems like too many patterns,
and a lot of ties to the same areas. You've got Lansdowne mentioned multiple times. Glen Burnie mentioned multiple times.
Yeah, I just can't imagine that it being unconnected makes less sense than it being connected, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
And I believe I mentioned Pamela Conyers was shopping at the Arundel Mall, and I believe that's where Joyce Malecki had been shopping.
Well, there you go.
When she went missing.
And then not only that, is a predator, a serial killer work in the area. Then you add in the connection of the Catholic Church and that asshole from
Father Maskell.
Father Maskell from the Keepers.
And then the murder of Cathy Cesnik.
And
which was very similar to these other women. Like, just the crimes of these other women. I mean, it's just so much to think about.
And they're all young. They're all attractive.
And, of course, we don't really have any solid evidence tying these murders together. We're just, I mean, this is just what we think. This is just opinion. But I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot going on with these cases. They're so eerily similar.
Yes, you do. And like we always tend to say, when we do cover unsolved missing cases, if someone hears this and thinks there's even a remote chance they might know something or know someone who does know something, contact your local law enforcement, because you never know. Well, that little piece of information you have could bust a cold case wide open.
Very true, Dylan. Well, resources today included mostly newspaper articles, from the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Evening Star, lots of the local newspapers, because these were all stories from the 70s. So I had to dig through a lot of old newspaper archives.
Well, that's interesting
There's
that it was
out there.
a big enough story then to bring the Washington Post, an investigative journalist from the Washington Post, all the way across the country who's working this case in person. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, they're not really all the way across the country because they're only 20 miles away.
Oh, the Washington. Oh, I'm thinking of Washington State.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the Washington Post is in D.C.
Oh, my God.
I've actually been to their headquarters before.
Well, just leave that in and people will know I don't know what I'm talking about.
I did a photography workshop there with some of their photojournalists.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tall building in the middle of D.C. So, yeah, it's only 20, 30 minutes drive from where these crimes took place.
Okay.
So they traveled across the county, Dylan.
I always forget it's Washington, D.C., too.
That's okay.
That's okay.
You're special.
It's okay. And I'm pretty.
Okay, see?
Thank you.
I'm the brains, you're the beauty. All right, well, thanks for checking out this episode of Mountain Murders, all about Unsolved Maryland. We will be dropping a cool offbeat episode Wednesday. We're starting a series on asylums.
Oh my gosh, asylums are scary.
They're very creepy.
Yeah, especially even when they're abandoned, even more so.
The architecture of asylums, it's usually got a little bit of that Gothic architecture. Architecture. I guess it was the time period, because most of these asylums were built around the 1800s.
Yeah, I know, but
so I think they kind of all have a similar vibe.
Well, I just mean, who's okay,
creepy.
we got this home. It's an asylum for people who have mental issues, which asylums were very run in a different way back then. They're very scary. And the doctor in charge was like God, if you will. But yeah, so let's go ahead and make this place as scary and creepy as we possibly can when we're building it.
You know what else I find very creepy?
I think I know what you're going to say.
Orphanages.
Yeah, hey.
That period.
Here's some kids that they don't have families or parents, and, we're going to try to help. Orphanages were rough, too. So let's build the building as scary and creepy as we possibly can.
Well, I just think there's so much sadness tied up with orphanages and asylums.
I definitely agree. I mean, if the energy can be absorbed and reside in a place, I think you couldn't find a better place to find bad energy.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about various asylums in the Appalachian area. I have a wonderful episode prepared for Wednesday. It's going to be really good. And I also should mention, Dylan, we have a brand new podcast.
Oh my gosh, we enjoyed talking about conspiracies so much on Offbeat that it led us to think we should have a podcast about weird stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be similar to Offbeat, but what's it called, Dylan? Tell us a little bit about it.
It is called Batshit Crazy in true Mountain Murders fashion. And it is about, everything weird, unusual, and unexplained.
Bizarre. Yeah, all the creepy, weird shit that you guys like. We'll be diving deeper into some of those themes.
The
subjects.
dark corners of reality.
Yes.
Ooh, you like that?
Yeah, so Tuesday we should be dropping our first 3 episodes. Be on the lookout for that. Of course, we will send out links on social media, Instagram, Twitter. Those are the 2 we're mostly using these days. If you haven't followed us on Instagram and Twitter, make sure you do. Mountain Murders Podcast. You can always send us an email, mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com. And if you're feeling froggy, join us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Yes, and no matter where you listen to us, just go up there and it takes just a second and click that subscribe button. It really helps us out.
Thank you. Have a great week.